but here to give us the inside story of what it's really like to have incredible courage and to stand up, based on the rule of law, against some of the most powerful governments in the world, is Dennis Kwok. Good.
So thank you so much for having me. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I drove down yesterday, had a lovely dinner with Paul here, and we, spent a lovely evening together, getting to know each other better. We got connected through a variety of events over the last year or so, and then he say, "Hey, have you heard of the new Canaan society?" I said, "Not really, no. Would you like to come share my story with you, all of you?" And Paul wants me to focus on, of course, my background, what I've done, but also my walk with Christ through all that. And I would focus on that, if I may. So Mitch mentioned that I went to King's College London. That is where I met my wife, Leslie. We met at law school. During my third year, I finally had the courage to go up to her in the law library to, make my introductions, and we met. And she was, like me, born in Canada from Hong Kong, but family moved back to Hong Kong, and then we both went to the UK for law school. And she's from a Christian family. I wasn't, although I went to a Catholic school in Hong Kong. It was only in my head, but not here. We got more and more serious, and Leslie and I, we had a serious conversation about her faith. And it got to a point where she said, if we want to, get married, we want to have a family together, it is important to share the faith together. And that's how I was introduced to Christianity. I was this annoying young kid who read a few philosophy books, who argue with, where the God exists, all that, all that really pointless discussion that I had inside my head. But eventually, I decided that I will take a leap in that direction, and got serious about going to church. But that was only really just the beginning of my journey. We got married in 2008. We now have 2 boys, living very happily together at Cambridge. It was around that time that I decided that I wanted to go into politics in Hong Kong. I had quite a successful legal career up to that point. But I decided I really wanted to have a greater impact and to try to help my hometown, Hong Kong, to fight for democracy, to defend their freedom as promised by the Beijing government in the Sino-British Joint Declaration, which they signed with the British government in 1984 and registered with the United Nations. So for my generation of politicians in Hong Kong, my generation, it is about defending that system that we had, about the freedom and democracy that was promised to the Hong Kong people. That was why we went into politics. And it was still, China was trying to get up in the world. It was still, they haven't shown their ambitious, now we know very devious and ugly ambition that they have about destroying Western civilization and competing with Western civilization and eventually dominating it. Those were the days when things were still civilized in Hong Kong, at least, and around the world. The geopolitical tension were nothing like we have now. And people believe that was a time when people believe the liberal hegemony or the liberal pipe dream, as we now know, that if you get China to become more prosperous, it will eventually embrace democracy, or the people there will be demanding to have more political freedom, and that the Communist Party will eventually have to give it to them. And of course, that didn't happen. When I got elected at the age of 34, I was elected to the Hong Kong Legislative Council, which is the Congress in Hong Kong. I was one of the youngest member, and I was elected by the legal profession. In Hong Kong, you have 70 legislators, lawmakers. Half of them are elected by geographic constituencies, like you have here. The other half is elected by professions and trades and unions. So you have one person representing the lawyers, elected by all the lawyers in Hong Kong, and that was me. So my portfolio was, as you can imagine, defending the rule of law, human rights, freedom, and working on justice-related courses. And in 2012, my wife and I, we decided to embark on this path. It was me, but my wife was very supportive. And she decided that she was also a corporate lawyer herself, and she decided that she would take a step back in her career to stay home and raise the two boys. And I would be able to go out there and do what I really love, a job that I really find purpose. And it was a job that I really, really loved because it gave me a platform where I could connect what I believe are Christian values and to connect it directly with what I do at work, which is which is kind of a very privileged position because if you work in finance, law, and other related industry, it may be more indirect that you have to find a way to connect purpose, the Christian purpose, with my work. But I had the privilege of deciding what I would like to pursue as a lawmaker. So I was able to, as I said, work on issues concerning the rule of law, about the justice system, about democracy, but more importantly, I could selectively pick social courses that I could work on, like the combat against human trafficking in Asia, special education needs for children, and political refugees, their rights, and a lot of the minority in Hong Kong that are being overlooked, that I could pick and choose these causes and use my office to work with them. And that really gave me a purpose in my work and how I see it being connected with, that I really believe that to be able to have the privilege of seeing the value and purpose of your work and not just doing it on Sunday or during your Bible study and bringing those values to connect with what you do on a Monday to Friday. And that was the life that I had. I really loved my job. I would be the kind of guy who, on Sunday night, I would be planning my week. I would be thinking, what I could do to better my week. What is my purpose ahead? What do I want to achieve on a daily basis? And I was getting more and more senior and getting more and more credibility in the political space. In 2016, I got reelected with 70% of the vote. And I was then elected by my peers to be the leader, the minority leader, in the House in the Legislative Council. We, the Democrats, were the minority, even though we had the majority of the vote from the community in Hong Kong, because the system is rigged, and Beijing wants to control the legislature. So we are forever the minority, even though we're the majority. But, we work against that system. We continue to advocate for democracy, and that was never delivered to the Hong Kong people up to that point. And that was at that point that things became more and more dangerous and more difficult because it became very clear that Beijing never had the intention to honor the promise of democracy to the Hong Kong people. It kept delaying and delaying, and then ultimately saying, sorry, there's a misunderstanding here. When we say universal suffrage or democracy in the Constitution, we meant something else. What they meant, they say, is that we will pick the candidate and you get to vote. So Chinese-style election. All right? And then the Hong Kong people said, no, and I voted against it. This is not the offer that was promised to the Hong Kong people. The majority of the public rejected against it. And then there was a stalemate. And then things began to really change on the international level. 2016 was the Brexit, the year of the Brexit, if you remember. And then President Donald Trump got elected for the first time. I was in Beijing in 2017 attending a high-level US-China dialogue, blah, blah, blah. I was a fly on the wall. I was invited to go listen in on what the elites from both countries have to say about world affairs. There was the Beijing elites, academic professors, ministers in one room. And then there were on the US side, professors from Harvard, from Yale, from the former Obama administration who just lost their job. They were in Beijing sulking. But the only missing voice in the room was the Trump people. They were not there. Everyone in the room, on the China side, they're feeling a sense of schadenfreude, almost giddy, that how can the Americans be so stupid, elect this man, Donald Trump? I've never seen such a weak America. This is what one of the professors told me during coffee break. They were feeling, we have a game, set, and match, that we could do a deal with Donald Trump and that's it. China will win coming out of this contest. On the US side, the people from the Obama administration, the Yale, Harvard, they can't help feeling so sorry for themselves. They can't believe that their country have elected this man and blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, I would like to hear what the Trump people have to say, because they're the voice that's missing from this room. And then at that moment, it seems like as if China and Chairman Xi Jinping is the only kind of adult in the room, the leader in the world that is kind of have it all together. He gave this really beautiful speech at Davos saying, we must continue to embrace globalization, that China will be the leader to provide the stability needed for the geopolitical world, blah, 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 okay? So I would say that 2017 was like a unipolar moment for China. It's like, all you guys are just screwing it up, whereas China is providing that stability that the world needs. Far from it. Because that was when Xi Jinping, looking back, decided to reveal his real intention, that the CCP wants to export its version of authoritarianism to beat and dominate the West. Because that they believe, since the global financial crisis in 2008, that the Western system doesn't work anymore. All that talk about democracy, rule of law, is just hypocritical. It doesn't work. It doesn't produce result. China is going to win. And our model is far better. And this is when they decided to have a global export of their model and values to dominate. And that really affected my hometown, right? You can imagine Hong Kong is part of China. Though we have this international treaty to protect us from authoritarianism, which for generations many Chinese have fought against. My mother was from mainland China. She swam from mainland China to Hong Kong when she was 17 years old, because it was during the Cultural Revolution and she felt she had no future there. And she and a couple of friends swam one night and one day from mainland China to reach Hong Kong. And to fast forward a little bit, I was the leader of the Democrats, one of the leaders, and the situation got more and more difficult. We have to stand our ground, of course. We have to hold Beijing to the promise. But we became more and more disillusioned in the sense that the situation is not getting any better. So I began engaging the international community. Starting from 2018, I began to come to the United States a lot, going to London and Brussels, speaking to your congressmen, your senators, Vice President Pence, and all the officials in the State Department about how America could better support Hong Kong. And I tell them that you should care about Hong Kong because if Hong Kong were to fall, which now it has fallen, the next problem you have on your desk is Taiwan. Now, unfortunately, that is the case today. Because Hong Kong was that really important piece of puzzle that was holding the regional stability of the Taiwan Strait together. Because Hong Kong was supposed to be the successful example for Taiwan. Because if Hong Kong remains free and prosperous, the message to Taiwan is, hey, if Hong Kong can be free and prosperous, Taiwan can be too. We can all be one happy family. That was the theory. Now, of course, that is not true. And the Taiwanese now look at Hong Kong as a horror show. And they are saying, Thanks, but no thanks to your offer of unification. And that is really the main reason why you see the stability of the Taiwan Strait region has really fallen away as a result of what happened in Hong Kong. So on a personal side, the pressure on my job got worse and worse. And there were days when I go to work and I don't know whether I would be coming home because they could arrest me on the way there or on the way home. And when I was at the legislature, the pressure was so much that, you get to work and I don't know what I could actually do to stem the tide of, the freedom that they're taking away from us. And then, you may have read about what happened in Hong Kong, but I'll just summarize it. In 2019, they decided to make a law in Hong Kong that would allow Hong Kong people to be sent to mainland China to face trial, criminal trial. And that has always been not the case because we don't trust the legal system in China. But they want to change that to allow people to be sent there for trial. And of course, as a Democrat, we fought against it, fought so hard against it. I didn't know what's going to happen. The government continued to soldier on. Beijing said, we're fully behind this. You're going to have to pass this law. And then on the 9th of June, there's a protest in Hong Kong where 1 million people showed up. I've never seen so many people, let alone Hong Kong people, in one place. 1 million people. Just imagine like 20% of the population in New York show up on one day. And that was it. But the government decided a few days later that we're going to keep pressing ahead with that we're going to ignore the voices of the people. And I remember going to work that day saying to Leslie, I don't know what are we going to do when they, keep pressing ahead with this thing. But the Hong Kong people's resilience is amazing. They keep showing up. They surround the legislature. And another peaceful protest, 2 million people showed up. And it got nastier and nastier because the police start cracking down on the protest. And then we were at the front line. My job as the legislator was to continue to advocate for the Hong Kong people in the international community about, the freedom that we're losing. And then I start finding their trackers underneath my car. That was the beginning of the, people that were coming after me. And then there was an attempt on my life that I was almost seriously injured by a car that was intentionally coming after me. In a supposed accident. The one thing I knew it wasn't an accident is there's 3 guys behind that black Audi that they completely totaled by crashing into us, and they never came out of the car. When we were waiting for the ambulance and the police, they just sat there with the face mask on, sitting inside the black Audi. I refused to believe that it was an attempt on my life at the time, but Leslie said to me, who's always much smarter than me, and said, it was an attempt on your life. It was a warning, if not anything. It was a warning. And then my friends, Christian friends, knew what I was going through. I have a very good Bible support team who taught me to pray Psalm 37 every day. And I remember the opening phrases is, do not fret. Do not fret. It repeated 3 times throughout that psalm. Do not fret because of those who are evil. Trust in the Lord and do good. And that was my prayer. I was so afraid. I was under so much pressure. And my friends tell me, under these circumstances, just pray through the Psalms. And the challenges, when you face the biggest challenges in your life, it is when God is walking most closely with you. And throughout 2019 and 2020, when I was going through that trial of my life, do you remember moments in your life when you ask God and say, why have I been so stupid? Why didn't I just stay a lawyer, enjoy your successful career? Why do you put yourself in that position where you lose your work, your life, your career, everything? Is it really worth it? That question, that moments of doubt, when you're asking, why am I in that position, God? Why have I been so stupid? And A couple months later, they passed the national security law. I won't go into details to bore you. Basically, it's like a Nuremberg law that they passed in Beijing that would basically persecute everyone who believes in liberal democratic values. It's really basically that. I was one of the first that they would come after. And I remember I was praying so hard, what should I do on a Sunday? Praying through Psalm 37, and then for the first time in my life, I heard the voice of God. I'm not the kind of guy who hear the voice of God. I was the kind of guy who, that's the Old Testament, it doesn't really happen these days. But I heard the first voice of God directly plucked into my head, saying, trust in me, Dennis. Trust in me, Dennis. I was very sure I wasn't talking to myself, that those words carry in very significant weight, as if it's just plucked into my head. And I didn't know that 2 weeks later, I would forever leave Hong Kong and go into exile. But God planted those words in my head. And then 2 weeks later, on a Monday morning, I had the habit of reading through Psalms and Proverbs during the most difficult times of my life. Psalms giving me the courage, Proverbs giving me the wisdom, hopefully, to get through it. And then on that morning, the verse that came out was, the diligent see danger ahead and take refuge. The simple goes on and suffer for it. And I took that verse to my wife, Leslie, and Leslie told me that same morning, during her prayer, she had the same message from God, saying, tell your husband to leave now. That was the message to Leslie. And Leslie told me, you've got to go. You've got to go. I will take care of the house. Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of the house. I'll take the boys to Canada. But you just leave. Now, I was a Canadian citizen, but I gave up my Canadian citizenship because of my job as an elected lawmaker. So I only had a Hong Kong passport. At the time, it was during COVID. The only place that I could go to is the United Kingdom, London, where I could stay for 6 months. I told the British government I'll be going there, and they said, fine, come. And then I bought the tickets, and the next evening, I packed my bags and went. Before I left, I called my mom and my dad. My dad recently passed away in Hong Kong. But my mom, my dad came over, and then they saw the suitcases in the living room, and they knew, of course, that I had to go. And my mom, during dinner, she started retelling her story of how she swam from China to Hong Kong. Of course, I've heard that story 1,000 times. I said, what's your point, Mom, that you had to swim and I get to take Cathay Pacific? And then my mom said, Dennis, shut up for once in your life and listen. When I left China, I thought it was a one-way street, that I was never going to see my parents, my grandparents, ever again, that I would never see my hometown, that's it. But lo and behold, 10 years later, she took 2 little boys, me and my brother, on board a train in Kowloon and went back to Guangzhou to see her parents, my grandparents, for the first time. Her message to me is, do not despair. These things could change very quickly. We believe in the values of freedom. We find that very precious. We hold on to it. Things will change. Things will change. So, I left Hong Kong that same evening. When I got to London, I just find some service apartment. That doesn't matter where. I didn't care. Didn't pay any attention. And then I booked some service apartment in a place that I've never heard of, called Cartwright Gardens in London. So I got there, 33 Cartwright Gardens. I knocked on the door. Someone opened. I stayed there. And then in the evening, I was by myself, and then, feeling very sad and sorry, those moments where, gosh, what have I done to myself? I'm now in exile. You were a lawyer, a lawmaker, and then now you're in exile. And I was walking around Cartwright Gardens. I didn't know who is Cartwright. And then I was reading the signs, like, oh, this garden is named after John Cartwright, a general in the British Army during the American Revolution. He refused to take up arms against the Americans because he believed, as a British, he believed what the Americans were fighting for were just and right. So he refused to take up arms against the Americans. You can imagine what happened to his career in the army. He was basically disqualified. He was basically kicked out of the army. And then he continued to fight for universal suffrage and democracy. Became friends with Thomas Jefferson later on in his life and became this quite well-known, not world-class, but well-known universal suffrage fighter. And he used to live in number 33 Cartwright Gardens, where my surface apartment used to be. I'm not comparing myself to him, but we had a similar career path. Me fighting for democracy, he did it in the 18th century, I'm doing it in the 21st century. God was sending a little joke to me. Say, Dennis, we know what you're going through. We've had guys like these before who've seen their career fall apart. It's okay, it's going to be fine. Remember, trust in me, Dennis. And it is so touching to think about, that phrase that really came into save my life. And I tell my boys today, the most important decision in your life, apart from trusting God, is who you marry. Who you marry. Imagine my wife, an ordinary human being in that situation would be, I don't know, should you be leaving? And then what's going to happen to us? Am I able to handle all this? But my wife, who's, by the way, ordinarily not the most decisive person that you would think. You give her a menu, she would say, well, should I have tacos? Or something like that. But on that day, on that crunch point, God gave her that inner strength and inner wisdom to tell me, you go first. You go. I've never seen her so decisive in her entire life. That certainty, you've got to go. I'll take care of everything, don't worry. I'll take the boys. And then we reunited 3 months later in Canada. Because once they're there, I, as a non-Canadian, can go to Canada, and we reunited there. And then they saw that I didn't go back to Hong Kong, and the government arrested all 60 people. All the top leaders of the democratic movement were arrested, and some of my very dear friends and colleagues are still in jail today. But the story didn't end there because they still hate me very much. As Paul said, they put a bounty on my head 2 years ago. So, it's not worth very much. It's only 1 million Hong Kong dollars. I'm not worth very much. But I continue to do sharing like this. Thank you very much. And I continue to advocate for what I believe is existential crisis for Western civilization. That we must wake up to the challenges that God has placed us here. And when we say a Western civilization, what we mean is society that are built on Judeo-Christian principles. Why do I believe in democracy? There's a senior Communist Party official that once said to me, to my face, say that people like you have no right to exist but for the grace of the Communist Party. Right? And then for us, it's like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. But, nowadays I teach my students at Northeastern University. I say, unless we find the moral and philosophical principle to support our belief, this senior party official is no more wrong than we are right. We need to find the roots of our philosophical moral principle. For me, it's Imago Dei. We're all born in the image of God. And that is fundamentally why we believe in democracy. Because, if you are equal to me, then there's no point us fighting out. Let's figure out a way that we can govern ourselves. This is essentially what democracy is about. It's a way to self-govern amongst equals, right? So, but a lot of people don't believe in that. A lot of people in this world do not subscribe to that value system. Let's not kid ourselves that people from different background, that senior party official from Communist China, these people don't subscribe to these values. So I would say let's not be naive anymore about this, one day we'll all sing Kumbaya around a fire, that to see what is facing us as a Western civilization. And by Western civilization, I emphasize we're not just talking about Western traditional sense. It includes people like me, our friends in Taiwan, in Japan, in South Korea. We have our Asian heritage, but we are all people who believe in those basic values and principles, and we need to stand shoulder to shoulder together. So thank you very much. I hope I didn't go on for too long, but I love being here. Thank you.